The title might seem overly dramatic, but I guarantee it's not clickbait. And to give you the quick answer, it's the triggers. If you came here just for that, thanks for watching. If you want to know more though, this right here is the Fantech EOS Pro. I'll skip most things that aren't really important, at least to me, and just jump to the pros and cons that I want to highlight. After that, I'll talk a bit more about the things that I've mentioned. So starting out with the pros. The build quality is great, it's got a good compatibility across different platforms and a seamless transition between those platforms. It's got most of the main features that I would personally need in a Pro controller for the Switch. It's got good Hall effect sticks that have a low error rate, and it comes with a dongle so you can use it wirelessly on the PC. And it also has Hall effect triggers, but this might also be a con, which I'll get to now, because for me the triggers are way too sensitive or don't have enough resistance. The D-pad isn't great, the placement of the extra buttons, so the plus, minus and so on in the middle is weird. The controller cannot wake the console up from sleep, and there is no app to adjust settings, although there are some things that you can adjust on the controller itself. Now also some neutral things. It's got an average battery life. It has a headphone jack, but you can only use it when you're in wired mode. There's 3 different D-pad shapes. It has rumble and lighting that can be adjusted. It's got remappable back buttons that you can also use for macros, but they have a bit of an unintuitive shape, although while playing I didn't have an issue with that. The controller comes with an extra pair of long sticks and even 3 pairs of O-rings for more resistance on the sticks, and it costs around $50 or euros depending on where you get it and if it's on sale or not. Okay, now going over the things that I do like a bit more. I like the feeling of all of the buttons. That includes the face buttons, the triggers, but also plus and minus, for example. I also like that there are trigger stops so that if you want, you can have shorter travel on those buttons. There's also no creaking, and overall the controller just feels like it's a high quality product. It's compatible with a variety of different platforms, so you can use it on the PC, Switch, iOS, macOS, tvOS, Android, Tesla, and even cloud gaming. And what I really like is, once you paired it to those systems, it's very easy to swap between those platforms. You just have to put it in the correct mode with the switch on the back, and then it instantly connects to the device. This made it very easy for me to swap between Switch mode, then PC via the dongle, and also even my phone over Bluetooth. It's also really nice that it does come with a dongle, since my PC doesn't have Bluetooth, for example, and so I can still play wirelessly on my PC, and the dongle works really well. It's got all of the main features for a Pro controller. The only thing really that's missing is NFC maybe, although you can just always use a Joy-Con or another Pro controller, and maybe HD rumble, but I personally don't care about that at all. In my testing, I didn't find any issues with the sticks. They felt nice to use and also felt accurate, but I'm only a filthy casual player, so I can't really give you a professional opinion on that. What I can tell you though is that they have a very low error rate of less than 1%, and according to the box, they use JH16 modules for the sticks, if that is something that you're interested in. Alright, the next part will be about the negative aspects, and it's gonna be a bit longer, but that doesn't mean that they outweigh the pros. I still really like this controller. There just are some issues that I have with the controller that I want to explain as best as I can so that you know whether that might be a big issue for you or not if you are considering to pick this one up. So starting off with the biggest thing in my opinion, I get a ton of accidental inputs from the triggers. Just resting my fingers on the triggers can actuate them and cause unwanted actions. This is even worse when I'm using the D-pad because I shift my hand upwards a bit and that changes my grip, and then I put a bit more pressure on the ZL button. In Bayonetta 1, for example, I had this moment where I just rapidly changed weapon sets, which, to be fair, wasn't an issue there, but if I had been in combat, that could mess things up, mess your combo, you might die, or whatever. Another example would be in Mario Maker 2, where I did a long jump when I didn't want to, and I just jumped into a pit and died. At first I thought this happened because the triggers slope upwards, but then I realized that the Xbox One controller also has those triggers, and they are also digital triggers, and it doesn't happen there, or on a PS4 or PS5 controller. Now you might be saying something like, well, maybe don't put your fingers on the triggers, but instead on the bumpers. But the way that this controller is shaped makes it so that my fingers automatically sit on the triggers, and it's not uncomfortable, but on this controller it feels very unnatural to have the fingers rest on the bumpers instead of the triggers. And also I feel like most games in general, and especially the games that I played, use the triggers way more than the bumpers. So what I kind of ended up doing to mitigate this issue was to either grip the controller looser in general, so that I don't have such a strong grip on the controller, or I would just stick out my index fingers so that they're not even touching the triggers at that point. Moving on, the D-pad has 3 shapes, which is good, but they all have the same problem, and that is there's no pivot in the middle. That means you can press in the middle of the D-pad, which makes some movements harder to do, while also making it very easy to accidentally hit a direction that you don't want to hit. This is very bad for 2D games when you need to be precise, or in a fighting game. I'm not a big fighting game guy, but I tried it out a bit in Dragon Ball FighterZ, and I messed up the quarter circle forward or back inputs many times, no matter which shape of the D-pad I used, and I honestly found it easier and more reliable to just use the stick at that point. I missed tons of supers at the end of my combos because the input didn't come through correctly. And then here I have a clip of Mario Maker again, where I accidentally did a twirl thingy because I was just trying to hold right while also doing the long jump, but because my thumb was ever so slightly too high on the D-pad, it counted as a directional input, so I also got the up input, and then he did this twirly thing, which almost got me killed. Also, you need to really make sure that you press the D-pad in strong enough in all directions and go in circles very strongly, or otherwise it might make these annoying and weird clicky noises because it seems to click in and out of position all the time. To be fair though, once it's in, it feels fine. The D-pad in general uses a spring-loaded system that seemed pretty good at first, but then I found some issues. Like I said, there's no pivot, and also the cross-shaped D-pad is a little difficult to get off. At least on the disc shape and the hybrid shaped one, there is a place for you to grab it and lift off. The plus and minus and also the screenshot and the turbo button are placed awkwardly in my opinion. The screenshot button is where usually the plus or the start button would be, so I end up taking lots and lots of screenshots when I just want to pause the game or skip a cutscene. I would imagine that this is something that I could get used to, but then on almost any other controller, the pause button is, or on this controller, the screenshot button is. So that's the PS5, PS4, and even the original official Switch Pro controller. So if I then go back to playing PS4, PS5, or the Switch with the Pro controller, I would end up hitting the wrong button again and have to adapt again. So this kind of seems like they wanted to be a bit quirky and do something different than the rest, but it just ends up being a nuisance. This controller cannot wake the console from sleep, which I feel like isn't the biggest deal, but at the same time it's something that I really value when a controller has it. It doesn't really negatively influence the gameplay, but it still would have been nice to have that feature. And then the last thing, there is no app to customize the controller or adjust settings like the stick or the trigger dead zones, which I think could help my issue with hitting the ZL and ZR buttons on accident all the time. Quick update on the app/software side of things. At some point they released a new firmware for this controller on their website. Still no software to actually make adjustments, but there might be something good here. In the download there will be also a text file with instructions on how to perform the update, and it tells you what they updated. And there are some good improvements here, but I'm interested in this part right here, the calibration mode. It says they added a calibration mode and then how you activate it. However, they don't tell you how you actually do any calibrating. When you hit the button plus, turbo and home, the controller starts flashing, but I still don't know how I can calibrate anything. Maybe I'm the idiot here because I can't figure this out, but I still think it should be easier to calibrate. Like, I don't know, maybe release some sort of software like they have for their bajillion gaming mice. I just thought I had to include this little section here, even if it didn't really fix any of my issues. Yet, maybe? Because the triggers are so sensitive, I would honestly prefer it if I would just have to push the trigger all the way down, bottom it out, in order for it to count as a button press. Also, I don't really get the whole thing with the audio port, because you have to plug the headset into the controller, and then the controller into the console, or rather the dock of it. Like, at that point I would just rather plug my headset directly into the console or the dock instead of having two cables coming out of the controller. That way I could still use the controller wirelessly. And if I have to have a cable running from the controller to the dock anyway, I'm sitting close enough to the console. So why wouldn't I just plug my headset directly into the Switch? Maybe there's something that I'm missing, but I don't see the point of the headphone jack being there if you can't use it when the controller is wirelessly connected to the Switch. On the PS5, on the other hand, you can actually plug a headset or headphones into the controller and still use it wirelessly. And that is legitimately something that I have used quite a few times already when I was like playing late at night. All things considered, I think this is a nice controller that comes with a decent amount of accessories like the O-rings, the 3D pad shapes, and longer sticks with good features like Hall effect sticks for longevity, but it's ultimately held back by mostly the overly sensitive triggers and the problematic D-pad. Although the triggers might not be an issue for you depending on how you hold the controller and what game you play. At somewhere around 50 bucks, I think it could be worth your money if you're looking to get a controller that has a great build quality, works on multiple platforms, and will probably last you for multiple years because of the Hall effect joysticks. And that is all. If you have any questions, you can leave them down below, and thank you for watching.